from South Carolina.
That's
Okay,
right.
give me your full name and your maiden name, and we'll go from there.
I'm Sarah Virginia Waits Pardue, and Vernon Waits was my father.
Um, we're starting to interview children of our veterans. So can you kind of give me a background of your mom and dad and your dad's journey into the 12th Armored?
Well, I came along well after the 12th Armored was a past part of his life other than the association, but it never became something of the past. It was always in his present, and I think his experiences with the 12th Armored, um, along with the values he grew up with, shaped him into the man that he became and the dad he became.
Tell me about your grandparents and about them as people.
My dad's parents were farmers, and they literally lived on the land. They had a milk route that they went on every Thursday, and they sold butter that they made and milk and eggs. That we lived in a small southern town in South Carolina, Edgefield, South Carolina, and they were very religious people. They were very active in a little country church called Red Hill, and they had 5 children, 4 boys and a girl, and my dad was the oldest boy. When he was 11 years old, he quit school to help on the farm. It's when they moved to the bigger farm that is still in our family, and he stopped school at that point to work on the farm with them.
What year was your father born?
1920.
So do you know what what did your grandparents give your father that prepared him to go into war?
A very deep faith that whatever faced you, you would have the strength to deal with it. Just a respect for mankind, and I don't think they were very prejudiced people at all. And I think that sense of purpose, that he understood the purpose of this war, and that was his duty. I think they were very American and proud of their country, and instilled that in their children. And he felt that duty to go. He didn't want to go, and even all of his life he said he didn't want to go, and he hoped he never had to go again. But he had that deep sense of Americanism and respect for country and respect for mankind.
Tell us how he got in. So at 11 he quit school. The process where he was in his entry into the Army.
Well, he had recently married, and when he was drafted, he had a two-month-old son.
Tell me your mother's name and initial, but
Okay, her name was Sarah Holmes Waits, and my brother's name was Vernon Howard Waits Jr., and we called him Howard. And he was 2 months old, and Daddy had gotten a job with the CCC, which was a government-supported thing that they did, infrastructure kind of things. And he was drafted and had to go, I think Mother followed him to Abilene, Texas with Howard, and they lived with a family called the Hornsbys, and had kept in touch with them through the years. Viola, I know, was the daughter's name, who was about my mother's age. My mother was 17. And I can't imagine that. My daughter's a year older now. And just, in fact, at this reunion, she's met John Molesky's wife, who she had not seen since they were in Abilene. But they have corresponded with Christmas cards. But, she made so many friends there, and everybody was in the same boat, and they lived in just a little one-room turned into an apartment. But proud of it, proud to be able to be there. And then she followed him on through Tennessee maneuvers, and then back to Texas, I believe, because he left to go overseas from Texas. And they tell the story of Captain Mock, who told Daddy Daddy had a car there, and he wanted to get the car home with Mother in Howard, but he didn't see any way to do it. So Captain Mock told him he'd give him a weekend pass, but not to let anything happen over 300 miles away, because that's as far as he was supposed to go. So they got the pass and left for South Carolina, and he brought Mother and Howard home and left them with her parents, and then went back to go overseas.
Tell me a rank division battalion that you're,
Okay.
well, he was in the 12th Armored
The
Division.
12th Armored Division.
the
He was
battalion.
in the 493rd B, which is field artillery. He was in field artillery and was on a tank. And so, yeah, that's the group he was with.
So let's go back, and he was drafted out of, he was still on the farm?
Well, he was still helping my granddaddy on the farm, but he had gotten a job with the CCC.
What stories has your mother told you about her experiences in Abilene? Is it any more than who she lived with, or has she ever talked about that?
Well, she worked at a dry cleaner's, and Viola and the Hornsbys took care of my brother while she worked. And she has a picture made, and she's got on this flowered dress, which she thinks is beautiful, and I look at it and think, oh, okay. But my grandmother, my mother was one of 11 children, and my grandmother had made that dress and mailed it to her, and she was so proud of it, of that dress. But the picture is a family picture of she and Daddy and Howard, and we've got several of them, and Daddy has his full uniform on and his hat. And there's one without his hat on, because he had beautiful hair, a lot of hair, and he was never bald-headed, and wavy hair. And she asked him that day to let's make a picture without her hat, and she never told him. But the reason she did that was she was afraid she may never see him again, and she wanted that picture of the way he looked with that hair. To pass on to Howard.
Was it difficult for a mother, a wife, for her husband to go? Has she ever shared?
Yes. She firmly believes, and I do too, that that generation of women have made their marriages much more successful because they had to go through that. And they realized early on what their husbands meant to them, and especially with a young child, and going back home, and just she's taught us a lot about the things she went through, and just wondering and not wanting for anything. She said, in a time where you had nothing and you wanted nothing, that's the only thing you wanted was for your husband to come back home. And she said today, we lived in a very rural area of South Carolina, and there were not telephones. I remember when my grandparents got telephones, and so there was not, you couldn't readily communicate. So when she got a telegram, she knew that a telegram was being delivered to her, and she was so afraid of what it might say. But she did know the war was over, but still, he was not home. And that telegram had said, "I've returned from no man's land," and that he would be home soon. But even at that, she didn't know exactly when he would arrive. So she had gone to church. Her parents and my dad's parents all went to the same little church, and they were in church, and her sister had stayed at home, and was just in walking distance of the church. And her sister came up to the church, and Mother and Howard got up and left. And then in a few minutes, Mama Waits, who was my dad's mother, got up and left. And at that point, the preacher stopped and said, "I think Vernon Waits is home, let's go." So it stopped the church service when he arrived home.
It was a happy occasion.
Oh, it was. But Mother talks about just following Daddy up on the Tennessee maneuvers and just staying with him as long as she possibly could to, before he had to go overseas.
What, he was in artillery. Describe what he did, your dad did.
Okay, he was a PFC, and there were, I think, 7 soldiers on the tank, and he was one of those members on that tank team. He was awarded a Bronze Star for doing what he did the rest of his life, was fix anything that needed to be fixed. And at the time, he said he really didn't think it was that much, but they were moving on the trek through Europe, and the communication line was down between the tanks and the front line. And if the tanks couldn't communicate, then they may shoot and fire on their own people up in front of them. So they needed those lines fixed, and it was down. So at that point, he was in a foxhole, and he got out of the foxhole because they were under enemy fire too, and put the cable back together, and got back, and then the communication was restored to the front lines. And in fact, the John Molesky that's here for the first time is the sergeant that wrote him up for that. So that was not, good to meet him.
What did, tell us some of your dad's experiences that he would share.
From the war,
or what was his attitude about sharing those things?
well, I think the horror things, the concentration camps, when we were older and started studying World War II in school, he showed us his history book that they had printed, and the pictures were there with just piles of bodies. He never talked about that. We would say, "Ooh, did you see this?" And the answer would just be yes, but he never, ever talked a lot about the horror of the war. He talked about a little German girl that he gave candy to, and how the children, civilian children, would run to American soldiers, because they knew they had things like that they would give them. He talks about the camaraderie with the men. He loved these men. It's a relationship that's different from, and maybe even closer than your brothers. And those that he would share just fun things and personalities, and well, old Juleson did this, and stories like that were fun. But as far as the horror of war, that was something he left in Europe.
Did he ever? He had sons. How many children did
There are 3. My brother was, like I said, he was 4 years old before Daddy was able to spend a birthday with him. And then I came along after the war, and then I have a sister also.
What do you think, or do you know, how your dad communicated with your brother? What did he communicate man to man to your brother about being a soldier, or about fighting, or about patriotism, or things like that?
Daddy was a very patriotic man, and he passed that on to all 3 of us. But he did not want my brother to go in the military and see the horror of war. My brother came along just in time to miss Vietnam. He got married just in time when you got the deferment if you were married. And then his first child came along and got that deferment. And then by the time, that would have worn out, they weren't taking him as old as he was. So my mother and my father were grateful for that he never had to go. But in high school, my brother was not the most fabulous student, but he was like Daddy. He has done very well with his hands. And but Mother was determined that Howard was going to go to college, And Howard was determined that when he got that high school diploma, that was going to be the end of it. And so a principal finally convinced her that that wasn't the way to go, that he would be fine. But we had an Air Force recruiter call our house, and as it turned out, Howard had talked to him at a career day at school, and rather than go to college, he was going to go in the Air Force. And I remember Daddy telling him, he said, "Son, if you're 40 years old, you're going to finish high school. But you don't need to do this. They made me go the first time. If I had to go again, they would have to come get me." But he said, you don't have to go. I'd rather you do something else. And I think Howard was just going to do it to keep from going to college. But at the same time, you think, well, that's not very patriotic. But at the same time, my brother is just an outstanding member of the community and has done an outstanding job with community service and what he's done with his life and for the good of the people in his community.
So he didn't go to the Air Force?
No, he didn't. In fact, he he was already working at my dad's business. My dad went into, had a mechanical shop and eventually ended up an International Harvester dealer. And Howard worked with him, and at his death was still working with him and carried on the business for a while after that. So.
Okay. Tell me about your earliest memories of the 12th Armored Division.
Okay. My earliest memories are my red polka dot pajamas got left under the pillow in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I remember that, and I remember being upset that those pajamas were left because I really liked them. But as a child, we came to these conventions. It was our big vacation every year. And then I think Mother and Dad felt like this wasn't a kid's thing, so we would go to the mountains usually for a short vacation too. But we always enjoyed them. As more and more, as I got to be an older child, they started, to begin with, we'd all go in the banquet, And I remember Mother and Daddy complaining that these kids don't eat this meal and we're paying for it, and it's nothing they're going to eat. So I guess other parents were doing the same thing because they started having a babysitting room. And we had a great time in there. Kids' names now, I still remember them, playing with them in there. In fact, there's a family from Florence, South Carolina, John and Lucy Davis, and they had a son, Henry, who was in between my sister and I. We're 3 years apart. So he was always in there. And other kids were impressed that we knew each other already. And we did some little bad things.
Okay, fess up.
My sister did more than I did. But then we went on to they started having teenagers party. They would have both. So at the point where I was in the teenagers party, my sister was in the babysitting room, and I think to this day they really think the police came, but I think it was a hotel security. But they tied the babysitter in a chair. And so she called hotel security. And that one little girl, Dawn Glantz, her parents aren't here this time, but they've come over the years. I remember her putting chewing gum in the mail slots. Used to have the mail slots go down by the elevator. And we'd get on the elevators, and I mean, still, they're saying here this time, well, we've got a lot of steps, but at least we're not waiting on the elevators. Well, we'd get on the elevators and punch all the buttons. Yeah, so it stopped on every floor. I said, no wonder they were waiting on it. So, I mean, we did stuff like that. And, it's great memories. And I remember those vacations more than I do the little trips to the mountain that were especially for us. And I've grown to love a lot of the people, the parents that I have seen over the years. And back in... must have been around 84, 85 when the National was held in Orlando, Florida. I went, and my daughter was 4 years old at the time, and Linda Juleson came with her son Jamie, who was maybe 6 or 7, and our two children had the best time together, and it was wonderful to see her again. And I love reading the Hellcat News because there'll be things in there about these adult children now that I knew growing up and coming to the conventions.
So did y'all, what was it like sitting around, or was this Army stuff just something you heard in all this?
We fought the war every year and won every time.
So did y'all sit around and listen to it, or did
Oh,
after
yeah.
a while you just kind of go, oh, we
Well,
heard it?
these men are so entertaining that even as a child we would laugh at their stories, and just their comments and everything, and even my daughter has gone to some Smoky Mountain chapter meetings with me, because now I take my mother as much as I can, and she's entertained with them. So we have had the Smoky Mountain group in our home. It came to Augusta, Georgia, which we're just right across the river, and so at the spur of the moment on a Tuesday, Mother and I said, well, we could just have a cookout Thursday night. So we did, and it's probably the best looking entertainment we've ever done for that many people in the least amount of time. But we got it all together, even had patriotic decorations and everything, and had about 75 people at my house for a cookout. And the news television station had contacted the hotel about this group that was in town, and they said, well, what are they going to be doing? And when they said, well, they're going to, one of the deceased members' daughter is having them at their house, and they said, oh, we'll go there. So the news people came, and I was like, I am not believing this, but we had the greatest time. It's the most fun I've had entertaining people. And even here, this time, I remember coming to your house. But it was great fun.
Why did your dad come? Why do you think your dad, or did he ever verbalize that, or what's your feelings about? Why did he keep coming back?
Well, when he first came, he was the only one in his battalion that came. But, I mean, I guess you develop relationships in foxholes that aren't developed anywhere else. And I think he wanted to continue relationships with these people. He was always like that with family. No cousin was too distant for him not to recognize them. And he wanted to maintain contact. And so he came, and then after a few years, and not many of the ones that he was actually with came, he started trying to look them up, contact them. He was the unit rep for years, in the early years for the 493rd, and he contacted a lot of people and got them coming. And of course, then that just made it more fun for him. And then in later years, I remember a conversation he and Mother had where one of the men had passed away, and Mother, they said, well, we hope his wife will keep on coming, or we wonder if his wife will keep on coming. And Daddy told Mother, he said, well, I'd like to hope that you would. So I know that's why Mother wants to continue coming. But they're her very good friends too, But over the years, the relationship just grew and grew, And I would say there are men in this. He was very, very close to his family, but there are men that he in 493rd that are as close as a brother to him. And I think that's the catalyst that kept him coming. Yeah.
Do you think it was kind of therapeutic for these guys to get together and talk about all this stuff?
Oh, I do. I think it really helped to put the horrible things in the background and bring the good things to the forefront in their lives. I definitely think it I know there are people still from World War II that have problems from what they saw and what they faced there. But I think it helped rather than to stay away from a group like this to come. Daddy was very proud of the 12th Army Division and what they did, where they went, and the people in it.
How old was your dad when he went into the war?
He was 22 or 23. Mhm.
Um, what do you think about the 12th Army Division and its future?
Well, I remember, and I had to be a teenager when I was in this memorial service, um, because as an adult, I've only been one time, other than since Dad's death. And I was in this memorial service, and whoever was in charge of it said, as long as there are two of us that can meet together, we will always have this service. And I remember at that time thinking, my daddy will be one of them, and I'll bring him. But of course that didn't happen. But you know, I I want to see it continue. I want to see it continue past the last two. You know, I don't want to see the light turned out. I would like to see, and I think the museum may be more the avenue of support for that. Um, at least, you know, that keeps it there. But I would like to see the association. I would like to see more of the. We see more and more of the adult children coming, and I would like to see it carried on just as long as it possibly can be.
What do you think pulls the adult children back?
The love passed on from our parents. You know, we know how important it was to them. We see how important these people are to them. My dad was in the hospital for a month before he died, and probably not a day passed that there wasn't some contact from somebody, you know, associated with the 12th Army. So that's pretty thick.
Yeah. Um, tell me, tell me some other stories about the 12th Army. See, this is the part I was telling you. I don't really know a lot about this part because I interview wives and the veterans.
Mm-hmm.
So, tell me some other kind of benchmark or little snippets of those things that you remember the very most about the 12th Army.
Well, I remember just staying up all night long. Well, and I remember the babysitting room closing, and they would take us into the banquet room. Then it didn't cost anything. And the band would stop playing, and Millie Kaminsky would start playing the concertina. And I remember doing the polka with my daddy around, you know, on the dance floor. And some of these guys can get really drunk. You don't see it much now. They go to bed early. But, you know, that was as much fun. You know, I looked forward to the babysitting party or the teenage party being over and we could go in the banquet room. I remember one city, I don't remember which one it was, but we saw John Wayne in a parade. You know, we thought that was great. And always somebody asked us to talk. We like to hear you talk. I don't think there's many Southerners in this group as there are Northerners. We want to hear your accent. But I just remember it being fun and looking forward to doing it. And it gave us the opportunity as children to travel pretty much across this nation, you know, visiting one big city after another. And they always had good tours and all. So it was an educational trip for us as well. And the 50th anniversary of their activation in Louisville, Kentucky was just a very educational experience for me. And we had brought Mother because that was after Daddy passed away. And my daughter came with us. She was in 6th grade. And her teacher just marveled. The only way I got her out of school is, well, she has to do extra work in her journal every day. And her teacher called me when she got back and she said, this was the best thing. Her journal was so marvelous, you know. And she had even included a lot of things about just the activities at the convention itself. And it's always been an experience. Mother and Daddy and the Davises from Florence chaired one at Myrtle Beach one year. I think 1970. I was a senior in high school. Uh, and, you know, we still get comments on that one because that was a little different environment from what most of them have been.
Um, so your mother comes back, well, probably because of your dad, but what brings you other than it would have pleased me?
Because these are her friends. You know, she's very close to me. There are two ladies here this year that also are widows that the three couples were very close friends. And she'll say occasionally, well, you know, I just don't know how much longer I can keep going back. And, you know, I say, well, you know, as long as you're physically able to, because those were your friends as well as Daddy's, you know. And because some of the people that Daddy became close to, he really didn't even know when he was overseas. You know, they're people that he's met through the association. And, but, I mean, they have that common bond, but they weren't actually together or have known each other overseas. And I think it's a joy to her, too, to meet people that knew Daddy, you know. And, I know Captain Mock, I think his name's Leon Mock. We call him Captain Mock because Daddy always referred to him as that. And he came to his first convention after Daddy's death. And Mother said, he's a short little guy. And Mother said, I just wanted to pinch his little head and say, why didn't you come before now? But, you know, she enjoys meeting those people that come as well. And it gives her an opportunity, I think, to talk about Daddy sometimes, too. You know, she doesn't want to bore people with it, but when she meets somebody like that, they want to hear what did he do with his life and what did he end up being, and, you know, so.
As you observe these men through the years, do you feel that their experiences in World War II made a difference in what they did, their professions, what they brought back to America?
Absolutely, I do. I feel like that they're a generation that knew that somehow that experience gave them the strength to know that they could realize their American dream. They could be their American dream. And they did anything they wanted to do with their lives. They just had that determination and strength to do it. I think they have left a legacy that no other generation, you know, will leave. It's so far in history, I think the greatest generation that there's been, and I think it's because of that experience. I think they learned to value life a whole lot more than younger generations do. To value relationships and time. I just think it had a great impact on what they did with their lives after they came back. In fact, in Daddy's funeral, our pastor, Daddy was always good friends with whoever the pastor was, you know, he just believed in making friends with the pastor. And he spoke a lot about how that thread through Daddy's life and what it meant to him. So I think it made a big difference.
What role do you see yourself in with the 12th Army in the future?
Well, I'll bring my mother as much as I can. And, you know, I would like to say that I could be real active, and I would like to be as much as I can, but, you know, I have a career, and I have a daughter in college, I have a husband. So I feel really busy in my life right now, but I think that some of us are going to have to step up, and, you know, maybe we'll have to help at least plan these conventions and things like that. And I don't know what direction I'll see it going after these are too old to come, or most of them are gone. And I think my vision right now is to perpetuate the museum and make sure that everything is there. We have a lot of things at home that probably belong in the museum, And when Mother's house is no longer occupied by her and probably out of the family or sold or whatever, then I think those things will come there. But right now they still have to hang on the walls because they've been there too long. That I just, I would like, I will help the organization just as much as I can. I would be willing to be involved in planning for conventions and things like that.
Well, what have I missed? Because I told you I'd never interviewed anyone, a child. What are some things I'm missing, some areas that you can help me with?
Well, I just think the main point I wanted to get across is the effect that this Great War had on this generation of men. When on the day my dad died, Senator Strom Thurmond called our house a few hours later, and the statement he made in closing his conversation was he was a great statesman, and I feel like that applies to all these men. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you.
Well, I enjoy doing it. I always want to talk about Dad.
Huh?
I like to talk about my
Okay.
dad.
Yeah.
Mhm.